The USS Vengeance materialized out of stealth mode like a mountain of metal and energy appearing from nowhere, and its massive bulk dwarfed every ship in the Zephyrian fleet, including their largest enforcement vessels. Ambassador Veltar felt his 4 hearts skip beats as his sensors registered energy readings that should have been impossible according to everything the collective knew about human technological capabilities. The battleship stretched, too, 5 kilometers from bow to stern, and bristled with weapon systems that incorporated design elements from 6 different alien civilizations, arranged in configurations that no single species should have been able to achieve. Coordinator Thexwin stared at the holographic displays showing power signatures that exceeded anything in the Zephyrian fleet, while weapon targeting systems locked onto every ship in their formation with precision that spoke of advanced tactical computing. "Where did they get that ship?" Veltar demanded, as his confidence evaporated in the face of technology that transformed the diplomatic balance of power in ways he had never experienced during centuries of collective expansion. The USS Vengeance moved with the fluid grace of advanced propulsion systems, while its hull showed the seamless construction techniques that only the most sophisticated civilizations had mastered. Captain Tony Rodriguez opened communication channels from the battleship's bridge, and his voice carried the calm authority of someone who held overwhelming tactical advantage in a situation that had suddenly become very dangerous for the Zephyrian fleet. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the USS Vengeance." His transmission reached every ship in both fleets. All Zephyrian vessels are targeted, and weapon systems are online awaiting further orders. The targeting displays throughout the alien fleet showed red warning indicators as human weapon systems achieved firing solutions on every collective ship with efficiency that demonstrated advanced battle management capabilities. Ambassador Veltar tried to process how a primitive species that barely had faster-than-light travel could have constructed a battleship that surpassed collective engineering in multiple crucial areas. The weapon configurations visible on the human ship included energy projectors, similar to Zephyrian designs, but modified with improvements that suggested decades of development and testing. "How did your species acquire such advanced technology?" Veltar asked Captain Martinez, while trying to maintain diplomatic composure despite the complete reversal of their tactical situation. Helen Brooks smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose careful planning had achieved exactly the intended effect, and her diplomatic training helped her recognize the perfect moment to explain humanity's true capabilities. "Earth has been in contact with other civilizations for much longer than you realized," Martinez replied calmly. "Some became genuine friends through respectful diplomatic exchange and shared their knowledge willingly. The holographic displays in the diplomatic chamber showed images of peaceful alien species that had established trade and cultural relationships with humanity based on mutual benefit rather than domination. Others provided unwilling technological donations after attempting various forms of conquest infiltration or forced integration," Dr. Peter Collins added with clinical precision. The USS Vengeance represents our synthesis of technologies from all these encounters. Coordinator Thexwin recognized weapon signatures from the Kethvar hegemony, which had disappeared from galactic affairs 30 years ago, after their fleet failed to return from an expedition to explore primitive civilizations in this sector. The defensive screens surrounding the human battleship showed characteristics of Velcarian energy manipulation combined with Zephyrian quantum, field generators, and at least 3 other technologies that should not have existed in the same configuration. The species you call primitive has been preparing for encounters like this since our first alien contact in 1947. Captain Martinez continued. We learned that appearing weak and divided often causes aggressive civilizations to underestimate our actual capabilities. President Amy Carter's voice joined the communication as Earth's leadership demonstrated the coordination that had made their deception possible for decades. Humanity prefers genuine diplomacy based on mutual respect, Carter said from her secure location, but we have extensive experience with beings who mistake diplomacy for weakness. The USS Vengeance's weapon systems remained locked onto every Zephyrian ship while additional human vessels began appearing throughout the area as stealth systems deactivated to reveal the true size of humanity's response. Ambassador Veltar counted 12 additional ships, materializing from concealment, and each one incorporated technologies that had been stolen, borrowed, or gifted from civilizations throughout this region of the galaxy. Your integration offer assumes that we lack the capability to defend ourselves, Helen Brooks said with diplomatic precision. We are prepared to demonstrate that assumption is incorrect if necessary. The Zephyrian enforcement fleet found themselves surrounded and outgunned by beings they had dismissed as primitive children. Playing with metal toys in the void, Captain, Rodriguez transmitted tactical analyses that showed exactly how thoroughly the human fleet could destroy every collective ship in the area if diplomatic solutions proved impossible. We do not seek war with the Zephyrian collective, Martinez emphasized, but we are exceptionally well prepared for civilizations that confuse peaceful intentions with military weakness. Veltar realized that his species had fallen into the same trap that had apparently claimed other aggressive civilizations in this region of space. The humans had deliberately presented themselves as primitive and divided to encourage exactly the kind of condescending approach that the collective used against genuinely weak species. Your counter-proposal for a non-aggression pact between equals, Veltar said slowly, as he processed the complete reversal of everything he had believed about human capabilities. Perhaps it deserves more serious consideration. Coordinator Thexwin watched. His tactical displays show human weapon systems that could penetrate collective defensive screens with efficiency that spoke of extensive testing and development. The Zephyrian Council members who had been laughing at human presumption now studied their sensors with the growing realization that they had seriously underestimated both human technology and human psychology. We anticipated that your species would respond to apparent weakness with arrogance and demands for submission, Dr. Collins explained. Most aggressive civilizations follow predictable patterns when they encounter beings they consider inferior. The USS Vengeance maintained its targeting locks, while Captain Rodriguez waited for diplomatic resolution or tactical orders from his superiors. The Mutual Non-Aggression Pact includes provisions for trade, cultural exchange, and cooperative exploration. Helen Brooks presented the treaty terms that humanity actually wanted. No surrender of sovereignty, no forced integration, and no administrative oversight. Ambassador Veltar found himself in the unprecedented position of negotiating with beings who held tactical superiority over collective forces, and his centuries of diplomatic experience provided no guidance for such a situation. The Zephyrian fleet began withdrawing to safe distances while their leadership transmitted hasty acceptance of humanity's proposed treaty terms. The collective agrees to your proposed non-aggression pact, Veltar announced with as much dignity as he could maintain under the circumstances. Captain Martinez received confirmation that the diplomatic objectives had been achieved, and the USS Vengeance began powering down its weapon systems while maintaining defensive readiness. The human fleet prepared to escort the Zephyrian ships out of the area while establishing the new diplomatic relationship based on mutual respect rather than forced submission. As the alien ships departed, Captain Rodriguez received new orders for patrol. Missions in other sectors where additional diplomatic situations awaited humanity's unique approach to interstellar relations. The USS Vengeance disappeared back into stealth mode, leaving the Zephyrians with a clear understanding that humanity's apparent primitiveness had been an elaborate diplomatic strategy designed to exploit the arrogance of would-be conquerors. Ambassador Veltar transmitted reports to collective leadership, recommending that humans be classified as a major regional power rather than a primitive species suitable for integration. The successful demonstration established humanity's reputation as a civilization that backed its diplomatic preferences with overwhelming military capability while preferring peaceful solutions whenever possible. Ambassador Veltar arrived at the designated meeting point with a fleet 3 times larger than his previous diplomatic escort, and his confidence had grown even stronger during the 7 cycles that humanity had taken to consider their inevitable surrender. The Zephyrian enforcement vessels positioned themselves in a defensive formation that could quickly become an offensive deployment if the primitive humans showed any signs of continued resistance to integration. "The humans will accept our terms," Veltar told his expanded council as they watched the familiar outline of the USS Liberty approaching their position. "No species has ever been foolish enough to reject collective protection once they understand the consequences." Coordinator Thexwin reviewed the enforcement protocols that would be implemented once the integration treaty was signed and human military assets were surrendered to Zephyrian control. The additional ships in their fleet carried the administrative teams that would begin immediate oversight of human governmental functions and the technical specialists who would assess Earth's resources for optimal extraction and utilization. Captain Jake Martinez piloted the USS Liberty toward the alien fleet with the same small crew that had attended the first meeting, but this time his orders came directly from President Carter and carried the weight of humanity's final decision. Helen Brooks sat in the diplomatic section, reviewing her new instructions, which were unlike anything in the history of human diplomacy and represented either the boldest gamble or the most catastrophic mistake in the species' existence. Dr. Peter Collins monitored all communications frequencies and sensor readings as they approached. The Zephyrian fleet, because this meeting would reveal capabilities and intentions that both sides had kept carefully hidden during their first encounter. The transfer to the alien diplomatic vessel proceeded exactly as before, but Veltar noticed immediately that the human delegation carried themselves differently and seemed less impressed by Zephyrian technology than during their previous visit. "Welcome back, representatives of Earth," Veltar said with the satisfaction of someone about to complete another successful integration. "We trust your leadership has reached the obvious conclusion about your species' future." The expanded Zephyrian Council filled the diplomatic chamber with beings who had overseen the integration of dozens of civilizations, and their expressions showed the same confident expectation that had preceded every successful conquest in their long history. Helen Brooks stepped forward with documents that appeared to be the signed integration treaty, but her demeanor lacked the defeated resignation that Veltar had expected from a species accepting inevitable subjugation. "We have carefully considered your generous offer of protection and guidance," she began formally. "However, Earth's leadership has decided to propose alternative terms for relations between our civilizations. The Zephyrian Council exchanged glances of surprise and amusement that any primitive species would attempt to negotiate with the collective as if they possessed equal status in galactic affairs, alternative terms. Veltar repeated with the patience of an adult dealing with a confused child. Your species lacks the technology and military capability to propose alternatives to our standard integration protocols, Helen. Brooks presented humanity's counter-proposal, which called for a mutual non-aggression pact between independent civilizations with trade agreements and cultural exchanges, but no surrender of sovereignty or military assets. The Zephyrian delegation erupted in the harsh sounds that passed for laughter among their species, and Coordinator Thexwin actually fell backward in his chair from the force of his amusement at human presumption. You propose to treat with the collective as equals. Thexwin managed between fits of alien laughter. What pathetic force could your primitive species possibly threaten us with to demand such consideration? The other council members joined in the mockery as they compared the situation to adults being challenged by children wielding wooden sticks against advanced energy weapons. Veltar waved his primary arms to restore order while maintaining his condescending smile at what he viewed as the final desperate bluff of a species facing inevitable conquest. Your largest warships are barely adequate for travel within your own star system, he said dismissively. Your weapons technology is limited to chemical explosives and primitive energy projectors that could not penetrate our basic defensive screens, Captain. Martinez listened to the aliens mock every aspect of human military capability while maintaining the calm expression that his new orders required regardless of the provocation he faced. The Zephyrian Council continued their detailed criticism of human technology and military assets with the expertise of beings who had conquered dozens of civilizations and understood exactly how primitive humanity appeared to their advanced sensors. Your species has not even achieved faster than light travel, another council member added. While we have been crossing the galaxy for thousands of years perfecting technologies that you cannot even comprehend, Dr. Collins recorded every word of the alien statements while monitoring his communication. Device for the signal that would change everything about this diplomatic encounter. Veltar leaned forward with the confidence of someone delivering a final ultimatum to beings who had no choice but to accept his terms or face complete annihilation. The collective has conquered star systems and absorbed civilizations far more advanced than your primitive Earth, he declared. We offer integration because we prefer peaceful solutions, but resistance will result in occupation and forced compliance. The Zephyrian enforcement fleet moved into attack formations visible through the chamber's viewing ports as a demonstration of the overwhelming force that backed their diplomatic demands. Your 7 cycles of consideration time has expired, Coordinator Thexwin announced formally. You will accept integration or face the consequences of defying the collective's will. Helen Brooks maintained her diplomatic composure, while Captain Martinez felt the weight of humanity's future resting on the next few moments of their encounter with beings who viewed his species as nothing more than another primitive civilization to be absorbed. We appreciate your patience with our decision-making process, Martinez said calmly as he activated his personal communication device. But before we provide our final answer, perhaps you should see what humanity considers adequate preparation for diplomatic negotiations. The Zephyrian Council looked puzzled by the human captain's confident tone and the strange, device he held in his hand, as if it were some kind of primitive weapon or ceremonial artifact. Veltar gestured dismissively at the human technology, while his sensors detected no energy readings or threatening capabilities from the simple communication. "Equipment, show them!" Martinez spoke clearly into his device, and his voice carried across the diplomatic chamber with the calm authority of someone who held powerful cards in a deadly game. The Zephyrian Council waited with amused expressions for whatever pathetic demonstration the humans thought would impress beings who had conquered half the galaxy through superior technology and military might. Coordinator Thexwin actually laughed again at what appeared to be humanity's final desperate bluff before accepting their inevitable place as subjects of the collective rather than independent beings with any real power in galactic affairs. The viewing ports of the diplomatic chamber continued to show the Zephyrian enforcement fleet in attack formation, while the aliens prepared to demonstrate the overwhelming force that had made their integration offers impossible to refuse throughout their long history of expansion. The emergency session convened in the underground bunker beneath the Pentagon within hours of the USS Liberty's return, and President Amy Carter looked around the table at the most powerful people in human government and military leadership. General Rick Barnes spread the alien treaty documents across the conference table, while Admiral Lisa Thompson activated the holographic displays that would show detailed analyses of everything the diplomatic team had observed during their meeting with the Zephyrians. "They want us to surrender our military and accept their administrators," Captain Jake Martinez reported with barely controlled anger. "They made it clear that refusing their offer would have serious consequences," Helen Brooks provided. A more diplomatic summary, but her assessment was equally grim as she explained how the aliens viewed humanity as a primitive species that needed guidance and protection from more advanced civilizations. Secretary of State Kevin Murphy studied the treaty terms with the careful attention of someone who had negotiated international agreements throughout his career, and his conclusion surprised nobody who knew his cautious approach to foreign policy. "We should accept their offer," Murphy said, firmly. "Our technology is centuries behind theirs, and resistance would be futile against beings who can travel between stars while we're still struggling to reach our own outer planets." The room erupted in arguments as military leaders and civilian officials debated humanity's response to what amounted to an ultimatum from a superior alien civilization. General Barnes slammed his hand on the table to restore order, and his weathered face showed the strain of making decisions that could determine humanity's future. "Surrendering our military means surrendering our independence," he declared. "Once they control our weapons and our government, they can do whatever they want with our species and our world." Admiral Thompson activated classified files that few people in the room had seen before, and the holographic displays showed construction projects and research programs that had been hidden from public knowledge for decades. "There may be another option," she said carefully. "Commander, Susan Blake has intelligence about certain military developments that could change our negotiating position." Commander Blake stepped forward with files marked with the highest security classifications, and her presentation began with satellite images of a massive construction facility hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. "For the past 15 years, we've been working on Project Vengeance," she explained. "A deep space combat vessel designed for scenarios exactly like this. 1. The holographic displays showed engineering schematics of a ship that dwarfed anything in the current human fleet and incorporated technologies that seemed impossible according to publicly known scientific capabilities. Dr. Patricia Wong joined. The presentation with xenobiology reports that had been classified since the first alien encounters that humanity had experienced decades before the Zephyrians made contact. "We've had previous contact with 6 different alien species," she revealed, to the shocked silence of officials who had believed the Zephyrians were humanity's first alien contact. Some became friends through genuine diplomatic exchange. The displays showed images of alien technologies that had been studied and reverse, engineered by human scientists working in complete secrecy since the 1980s. Others provided unwilling technological donations after attempting various forms of conquest or infiltration. Dr. Wong continued with clinical detachment. The USS Vengeance incorporates advances from all of these encounters. Captain Tony Rodriguez appeared via secure video link from the construction facility, and his report confirmed that humanity's secret weapon was ready for operational deployment despite officially still being under construction. The ship completed space trials last month. Rodriguez reported, "All systems are functional, and we're prepared for immediate deployment if ordered." President Carter absorbed the implications of what she was hearing, while calculating the risks of either accepting alien dominance or revealing that humanity was far more advanced and prepared than they appeared. The debate continued for hours as civilian leaders worried about provoking a war with superior alien technology, while military commanders argued that submission would lead to the gradual destruction of human civilization. Commander Blake presented intelligence gathered from intercepted alien communications and deep space monitoring that revealed the true nature of Zephyrian integration policies. Every species that has accepted their protection treaty has been systematically relocated from their home worlds, she reported. The Zephyrians strip-mine the planets for resources, while the former inhabitants become labor forces in their industrial complexes. The holographic displays showed the fate of worlds that had once supported thriving civilizations, but were now barren mining operations managed by Zephyrian colonial administrators. Dr. Wong provided biological analyses that confirmed the pattern of cultural destruction that followed Zephyrian integration as species lost their identity and became anonymous workers in the alien empire. "They're not offering protection, General," Barnes concluded. "They're offering slavery with better working conditions." Admiral Thompson reviewed the tactical assessments of both human capabilities and Zephyrian technology based on observations made during the diplomatic meeting. The USS Vengeance represents our best chance of demonstrating that humanity is not the primitive species we appear to be, she said, but using it means revealing technologies and capabilities that we've kept secret for decades. Secretary Murphy continued to argue for acceptance of the alien terms, despite the evidence of what happened to integrated species, because he believed resistance would result in immediate annihilation rather than gradual absorption. President Carter listened to all arguments before making the decision that would determine whether humanity remained free or joined the long list of species that had accepted Zephyrian guidance. "We reject their treaty," she announced, "and we prepare to demonstrate that humans are not as primitive as they believe." The room fell silent as the implications of open defiance against a technologically superior alien civilization settled on everyone present. General Barnes began immediate preparations for military alerts across all human space installations while Admiral Thompson coordinated with Captain Rodriguez to position the USS Vengeance for maximum strategic impact. Commander Blake activated deep space monitoring systems to track Zephyrian fleet movements, while Dr. Wong prepared briefings about alien psychology and tactical preferences based on decades of secret research. Helen Brooks received new instructions for the upcoming diplomatic meeting that would determine whether humanity's gamble would result in respect or destruction. The next phase of preparation involved coordinating responses across all human governments and military organizations while maintaining the appearance of a primitive species struggling to make a decision about their future. Captain Martinez prepared for another journey to meet the Zephyrian delegation, but this time he carried orders that could either establish humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs or trigger the first interstellar war in human history. President Carter authorized the release of classified technologies and military assets that had been developed in absolute secrecy since humanity's first alien encounters decades before. The countdown began toward a confrontation that would reveal whether human deception and preparation could overcome Zephyrian arrogance and technological superiority in a test that would determine the future of both civilizations. The Zephyrian diplomatic vessel emerged from quantum fold space with the elegant grace that marked all of their advanced technology, and Ambassador Veltar observed the crude human ship approaching their position with barely concealed amusement. USS Liberty looked exactly like what he had expected from a species still struggling with basic space travel, and its hull showed the rough construction methods of a civilization that had not yet learned to properly manipulate matter at the molecular level. "Look at that primitive design," Coordinator Thexwin commented as the human vessel drew closer. "They still use chemical propulsion and metal plating instead of energy fields for protection." The other members of the Diplomatic Council gathered around the main viewing portal and shared the same condescending expressions that Veltar had seen countless times when dealing with newly discovered species. Captain Jake Martinez felt the magnitude of the moment as the USS Liberty approached. The massive alien vessel, which dwarfed his ship by a factor of 10 and seemed to shimmer with technologies that were completely beyond human understanding. The alien ship had no visible engines or weapon systems, yet it moved through space with perfect precision and generated energy readings that made no sense according to human physics. "Maintain steady approach," Martinez ordered his crew as they entered the final phase of their approach to what would become humanity's first diplomatic meeting with an alien civilization. Dr. Peter Collins monitored every sensor reading and communication frequency, while Helen Brooks reviewed her diplomatic protocols one final time before what could be the most important negotiation in human history. Transfer to the alien vessel happened with technology that seemed like magic to the human delegation, as they were somehow transported directly from their ship's shuttle bay to a vast chamber inside the Zephyrian diplomatic complex. Ambassador Veltar greeted them with what appeared to be the alien equivalent of a formal bow, though his forearms and elongated torso made the gesture look strange and otherworldly to human eyes. "Welcome, representatives of the species known as humans," Veltar said, through translation devices that converted his complex vocalizations into perfectly understandable English. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective, and these are my advisors." Helen Brooks stepped forward with the formal diplomatic greeting that had been prepared by Earth's best experts, and she presented the cultural exchange materials that represented humanity's greatest achievements in art, science, and philosophy. "We bring greetings from the people of Earth and hope for peaceful relations between our civilizations," she said while offering a small container that held samples of human music, literature, and scientific discoveries. Veltar accepted the gift with polite interest, though his expression suggested he was examining curiosities from a primitive culture rather than meaningful contributions to galactic knowledge. The Zephyrian Council members examined the human offerings with the same attitude that adults might show when children present them with crayon drawings and simple crafts made in school. "Your species shows remarkable creativity given your limited technological development," Veltar commented in a tone that managed to be both complimentary and condescending at the same time. Coordinator. Thexwin picked up one of the data storage devices containing examples of human literature and held it as if it were an amusing toy from a less advanced civilization. They still use physical storage media instead of quantum consciousness transfer. He observed to the other council members who responded with what sounded like polite laughter. Captain Martinez felt his jaw tighten at the obvious mockery, but Helen Brooks placed a restraining hand on his arm and maintained her diplomatic composure, despite the insulting treatment they were receiving. The formal presentation continued as the humans explained their democratic systems, their scientific achievements, and their hopes for peaceful expansion into the galaxy. Each topic seemed to provoke more amusement from the Zephyrian delegation, who clearly viewed human civilization as quaint and primitive rather than a legitimate equal in galactic affairs. "Your democratic processes are inefficient," Veltar observed after listening to Helen's explanation of human government. "Why allow uninformed masses to make decisions when superior beings could guide them more effectively?" Dr. Collins tried to explain the human concept of individual rights and self-determination, but the alien council seemed unable to grasp why any civilization would choose such an inefficient system when benevolent guidance was available. "And your military expenditures," Coordinator Thexwin added with barely concealed mirth. "You spend enormous resources building weapons to fight each other instead of focusing on technological advancement and cultural development." The Zephyrian displayed holographic images of human military equipment and vehicles, which looked pathetic compared to the advanced technologies surrounding them in the alien diplomatic chamber. "Your largest warships are like metal toys floating in the void," Thexwin continued, while the rest of the council shared what passed for laughter among their species. "No energy shields, no quantum. Weapons, no dimensional manipulation capabilities." Captain Martinez watched the aliens mock everything that humanity had built and achieved while maintaining the polite facade of diplomatic courtesy that barely concealed their true feelings. The meeting continued for several hours as the Zephyrians presented their standard integration proposal with the same confidence they had shown to dozens of other primitive species throughout their expansion across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Collective offers your species protection and guidance, Veltar explained while displaying terms that sounded reasonable on the surface but contained troubling implications for human independence. "You would surrender your military assets to prevent unfortunate conflicts and allow our administrators to guide your governmental decisions toward more efficient outcomes," he continued. "In exchange, we provide advanced technology and ensure your peaceful existence within our sphere of influence." Helen Brooks studied the proposed treaty with growing concern, as she realized that accepting these terms would effectively end human independence and reduce Earth to a client state under alien control. "We appreciate your generous offer," she replied carefully, "but we would need time to consult with our leadership before making such an important decision." The Zephyrian Council exchanged glances that suggested they found human caution amusing rather than reasonable, and Veltar nodded with the patience of an adult dealing with hesitant children. "Of course," he said. "We understand that primitive species often need time to overcome their initial fears and accept the benefits of proper guidance." Coordinator Thexwin leaned forward with obvious confidence. "In the outcome, 7 standard cycles should be sufficient for your leaders to recognize the advantages of integration with a superior civilization." The meeting concluded with formal pleasantries, but the underlying message was clear to everyone in the room, and the Zephyrians made no effort to hide their certainty that humanity would accept their terms rather than face the alternative. Captain Martinez led his delegation back to the USS Liberty with growing anger at the condescending treatment they had received from beings who viewed humanity as nothing more than another primitive species to be absorbed into their vast empire. "They think we're just going to roll over and surrender everything we've built," he said to Helen Brooks, as they prepared for the journey back to Earth. Dr. Collins reviewed the recordings of the meeting and shook his head at the obvious contempt the aliens had shown for human achievements and capabilities. The USS Liberty began its journey home, while its crew processed the reality that humanity's first contact with alien intelligence had revealed a universe where strength determined status and their species was considered weak and primitive by established powers. Behind them, the Zephyrian diplomatic vessel maintained its position with complete confidence that the humans would return in 7 cycles, ready to accept integration into the collective like so many other species before them. The signal came from the 3rd planet of a small yellow star on the outer rim of the galaxy, and Ambassador Veltar studied it with growing amusement as his long fingers danced across the control interface of his command ship. The message was crude and simple, like a child's first attempt at communication across the void, and the Zephyrian translation matrix had little trouble converting the basic mathematical sequences and primitive audio recordings into something his species could understand. "Greetings from the people of Earth." The message began in what the translators identified as the dominant language of the species, and Veltar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed the elementary nature of their approach. His aide coordinator Thexwin approached with the full analysis report clutched in his secondary arms, while his primary limbs gestured dismissively at the display showing the transmission source. "The species calls themselves Humans Ambassador, and our deep scans reveal a single world civilization with barely adequate technology for basic space travel," Thexwin reported with the practiced efficiency that had made him valuable to the Zephyrian collective for over 2 centuries. Veltar nodded slowly as he absorbed the data, streams flowing across his neural interface, and what he saw confirmed his initial assessment of yet another primitive species stumbling into the greater galaxy without proper preparation or understanding. The humans had managed to build crude vessels that could travel between the worlds of their own star system, but their fastest ships would take centuries to reach even the nearest inhabited systems, and their weapons technology seemed focused primarily on destroying each other rather than any serious threat to established galactic powers. "Have they achieved faster than light travel?" Veltar asked, though he already suspected the answer from the way the signal had taken years to reach their monitoring stations. "Negative, Ambassador," Thexwin confirmed with what passed for a smile among their species. "They appear to be using primitive radio waves and basic fusion drives with no evidence of quantum field manipulation or dimensional folding capabilities." The bridge crew of the diplomatic vessel shared the same amused expressions that Veltar had seen countless times before when the collective encountered new species at this stage of development, and the pattern was always the same regardless of their physical appearance or cultural quirks. First came the shock and awe when they realized they were not alone in the universe. Then the desperate attempts to prove their worth and value to more advanced civilizations, followed by the inevitable acceptance of their place. In the greater order of things, Veltar had personally overseen the integration of 47 species into the collective during his long career, and each one had followed this predictable sequence with minor variations based on their particular psychology and social structures. The humans would be no different despite their apparently aggressive nature and tendency toward internal conflict, which the preliminary scans had revealed in abundance across their single world. Prepare a response. Transmission! Veltar commanded as he settled into his decision-making posture with all four arms folded across his chest in the traditional manner. Use the standard first contact protocols and schedule a diplomatic meeting in neutral space. Meanwhile, across the vast distance that separated the Zephyrian fleet from the small blue world that had sent the message, Captain Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty and watched his communications officer work frantically at her station. The ship was humanity's newest and most advanced vessel, built specifically for deep space exploration and possible first contact scenarios, though most of the crew had assumed such an event was still decades away when they launched 6 months ago. Captain, we're receiving a response, Lieutenant Sarah Kim announced from her position at the communications array, and her voice carried the excitement that everyone on the bridge was feeling at this historic moment. The signal was unlike anything in human experience and required their best computers and linguists working together to begin making sense of the complex patterns and mathematical relationships embedded in the transmission. Dr. Peter Collins leaned over the translation console, where streams of data flowed across multiple screens as the ship's artificial intelligence systems worked to decode the alien message, and his weathered face showed the strain of the past several hours. They're using mathematical constants as a baseline for communication, he explained to Captain Martinez while pointing at various symbols and patterns on his displays. The same way we did, but their mathematics are far more sophisticated than ours. Helen Brooks joined them at the communications station, and her diplomatic training helped her focus on the practical implications rather than the technical marvel they were witnessing. "What are they actually saying, Doctor?" she asked with the directness that had made her successful in negotiations with foreign governments and corporate leaders throughout her career. Dr. Collins adjusted his glasses and highlighted several sections of the decoded message before responding with careful precision. "They acknowledge our transmission and express interest in formal contact," he said. "They're proposing a meeting in space roughly halfway between their current position and our solar system." Captain Martinez felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders as he realized that humanity's first diplomatic contact with an alien civilization was about to become his responsibility. The crew around him represented the best that Earth had to offer, with expertise in everything from xenobiology to advanced physics, but none of them had any real experience with the kind of situation they now faced. "How long until we can reach the proposed meeting point?" Martinez asked his navigation officer, who had been working on the problem since the alien response arrived. "Approximately 18 days at maximum sustainable velocity, Captain," came the reply, along with a series of calculations that appeared on the main display screen. Martinez nodded and activated the ship's internal communication system to address the entire crew about their New mission parameters, all hands. This is the captain. His voice echoed through every compartment of the USS Liberty. We have received confirmation that we are not alone in the universe, and we have been invited to represent humanity in our first diplomatic contact with an alien civilization. The excitement was palpable throughout the ship, as crew members realized they were about to become part of the most important event in human history. Helen Brooks began preparing her diplomatic materials and cultural exchange packages that had been designed by teams of experts back on Earth for exactly this kind of scenario, while Dr. Collins worked with the xenobiology team to analyze every detail they could extract from the alien transmission. The ship's computer systems ran continuous simulations and analyses, trying to predict what kind of beings they might encounter and what protocols would be most appropriate for successful first contact. Captain Martinez reviewed the extensive briefings that had been prepared by Earth's best minds about possible scenarios and appropriate responses, but nothing could really prepare them for the reality of meeting an intelligence that had evolved on a completely different world. The USS Liberty changed course toward the designated meeting point, while its crew prepared for an encounter that would determine humanity's place in a universe that had suddenly become much larger and more complex than anyone had imagined. Behind them, Earth continued, its rotation unaware that its children were about to take their first steps into a galaxy full of ancient civilizations and powers beyond their current understanding.